In this segment, our topic is Third Party Energy Suppliers, or as we call them, TPS companies. Before we get further into our subject matter, let me introduce my guests. Both are staff members at the Office of the People's Counsel. Stephen Marincic, Consumer Outreach Specialist in OPC's Consumer Services Division, and Cheryl Morse, also a Consumer Outreach Specialist in our Consumer Services Division. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for having me.
Let me begin by telling you a little bit about third-party energy suppliers. A third-party energy supplier is a company other than your local utility that enters into a contract with a consumer to provide electric or natural gas energy. Now, the local utility still delivers that gas or electricity to you, the consumer, and the consumer continues to be billed by your local utility, Washington Gas or Pepco, for delivering the energy to the residents or business and for maintaining the electric power lines and gas pipelines that serve customers locally. Now, the TPS company is responsible for delivering that energy supply to Pepco or Washington Gas. TPS companies came about after both Washington Gas and Pepco energy supply services were deregulated. The goal was to offer consumers a choice of energy providers. The intent was that by creating competition in the utility marketplace, consumers would have the opportunity to save money and see service quality improvements. Competition for local energy consumers has continued over the last 20 years. However, there have been challenges along the way. Early on, following deregulation, between late 2000 and early 2001, OPC began to receive complaints about an energy supplier called PowerTrust.com that was switching DC consumers from their Washington Gas energy supply services to PowerTrust without their consent. This is known as slamming. OPC had to take legal action against PowerTrust to protect DC residents from such abusive business practices. Then, again, in 2012, another company entered the marketplace, Starion. OPC received repeated complaints about this company, which led OPC to take legal action that resulted in the company suspending service in DC, agreeing to revise its customer acquisition process, and providing $100,000 in settlement that was used to help DC consumers struggling to pay energy bills. Now, Cheryl, you work with consumers on a daily basis. Could you please briefly explain OPC's consumer complaint process?
Yes, of course. I would love to explain this. When a DC resident contacts OPC either by phone, walk-in, or online, a consumer service representative takes all their information pertaining to the complaint, such as the utility in question, account number, and some background data as well. OPC contacts the utility and the investigation is then started. The standard turnaround for utilities is usually 30 days, but sometimes it's a lot sooner.
How does a consumer know that their complaint is with a third-party energy supplier and not their local utility, Pepco or Washington Gas?
That is a great question. Often the consumer does not know until they see an increase on their bill. We often are the first to tell them that their service has been switched. I will ask the customer to look at their bill in the section entitled Summary of Your Charges. Then I will ask them to locate the line that begins with New Electric Supply Charges on their Pepco bill, or the section Natural Gas Supply Service, or on their Washington Gas bill. There they will find the name of the TPS. Examples are provided on the OPC TPS guide, which can also be found on our website.
Okay, so that's the OPC's guide to switching?
Switching, yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, what can you do when an unhappy consumer has taken service from a third-party energy supplier and wants to be switched back to Pepco or to Washington Gas?
If a consumer finds a TPS on their bill, other than the SOS provider, and the SOS stands for the Standard Offered Service, indicates that service is provided by the local utility, gas or electric, under the rules set by the Public Service Commission. What OPC will do then is to contact the TPS, requesting that the customer be switched back to the SOS provider. We let the customer know that this process will take 1 to 2 billing cycles before the actual change is taking place. If the customer has been charged a higher rate by the TPS, OPC will then request a recalculation based on the rates that they've been quoted or were quoted by the SOS. Often we have instances where customers have been charged 2 or 3 times more than the SOS provider has charged at that time.
Stephen, can you tell our listeners a little bit about who these third-party energy suppliers are?
I would be happy to. TPS companies are authorized to sell electricity or natural gas service in the district. They are authorized by the DC Public Service Commission, that is the regulatory agency. They have to go through a rigorous process to become regulated in the DC, to get a license. They are required to have an insurance bond. They have to attend an annual supplier workshop. It doesn't matter how long they have been in the district or operating and selling their products. They must go through the annual supplier workshop every year. That includes information on marketing. Contact information has to be available, and including a website and information on how consumer complaints would be handled by the company. Contact information has to be there, copies of what a contract would look like, including all terms on the contract, including whether or not rates are variable or on a fixed rate. And we have to have sample bills if they're billed independently of Pepco. That doesn't normally happen in the district. You would always receive a bill from the utility, which is either Pepco or Washington Gas.
So, Stephen, you said that these companies are regulated by the Public Service Commission. Now, are the prices that these companies charge regulated by the commission?
The prices of the utility companies for third-party suppliers are not regulated. This is part of the issue that we see with consumers. The standard offer service that Cheryl was talking about, those prices are set and regulated through the Public Service Commission. However, these companies are not. They purchase their supply on the open market, or they produce it through their own power plants or gas plants. And they can basically charge you whatever they feel is fair to them, not necessarily to you.
Let's talk about how these solicitations take place. Many of our listeners might be surprised to realize that they have already been contacted and they may need to closely examine their own bills. What are some of the ways these companies contact consumers?
There are quite a few different ways in which a TPS may solicit in DC. By telephone, door-to-door, public spaces such as outside metro stations, or even outside the Department of Energy. Here we found a big problem outside of energy, where customers will go into energy to get assistance and come out and be approached by a solicitor at that time.
Cheryl, so when you say energy, you're talking about the District Department of the Environment, Energy and the Environment?
Yes, DOEE. Thank you. Sometimes the solicitor tells the customer that they're with Pepco or Washington Gas, and that is not true. A customer should always know neither Pepco or Washington Gas is affiliated with any TPS company. At times, customers are even offered $50 gift cards if they switch to their company. If a TPS representative asks for your bill, do not give it to them. They write down the account number, and that's all they need to make you a customer and have you switch. And that's also a form of slamming. we suggest that you ask for them to leave the literature to give yourself time to read it all. And of course, if you have any questions, contact OPC. We'll be happy to help you. Often TPS solicitors prey on seniors and low-income residents. I had a case where a senior was on a very fixed income. She received an introductory rate lower than the SOS, about 7 cents per kilowatt. And in 3 months, she saw her bill almost triple, from 7 cents to 21 cents a kilowatt hour. This is the highest I've ever seen a customer's kilowatt use or costs go up. Of course, we asked for a recalculation, and we got it.
Stephen, can you explain why utility customers might want to switch their energy supply services?
Yes, I'd be happy to. There are 3 primary reasons why a consumer may be interested in switching their supply. The first is people are just looking for savings. Sometimes we can see that a third-party supplier may be able to offer a cheaper rate than what you could get through either Pepco or Washington Gas. I find through our experience that those situations usually occur with a longer-term fixed-rate product that locks in a cheap price with the guarantee from the company that you will sign up with them and you'll stay signed up with them over the term, and that's why they're willing to give you this cheaper rate. We also see that people are looking for, especially in the district with our ambitious green energy goals, that consumers are looking for green energy products. So things that might include electricity generated through solar or wind farm. There are many choices for green energy products, and third-party suppliers can offer those. I know that consumers have approached me and asked, well, how can I know that this product, this company is selling green energy and not just a pretty sales pitch? That is actually something that all the third-party suppliers must keep available, the information of how they purchase the green energy, how it's produced, and have that ready and able to be distributed to consumers so that they can know that they're actually purchasing a green energy to help that in our city. Another one is predictable billing. Some consumers really like the idea that they know what they're paying each month. Some of these companies, like I said, lock in that rate. And so it helps the consumer know that they're not going to go through wild price fluctuations, which can happen. So that's another reason that consumers will enroll in these companies.
So to be clear, what we are talking about is one portion of utility service that the consumer pays for. That's the generation or the energy supply. So about 65% of the consumer's bill is the actual energy supply cost, whether it's electricity or natural gas. So it's this unregulated portion of the service that is competitive. Is that right?
That's correct. And remember that one thing I want to stress, and I know my colleague would also want to stress, is that you are not required in any way to make a choice. If you are happy with the supply from from either Pepco or Washington Gas, you can do nothing and you will still receive the same service through those utilities. It's only if you are interested in shopping that you can look into these third-party supply companies. But again, those rates are not regulated, whereas the rate through the utility is by the DC Public Service Commission.
You are listening to OPC Radio Connect. I am Karen Sistrunk, Deputy People's Counsel for the District of Columbia. My guests are Stephen Marincic and Cheryl Morse. Both are consumer outreach specialists in OPC's Consumer Services Division. We are talking about third-party energy suppliers and the experiences that consumers have had since the opportunity to choose who supplies their utility services in the DC marketplace. Now, Cheryl, can you explain some of the consumer do's and don'ts when a customer knows they are being asked to sign a contract?
I'd be happy to do that. First, if a customer if someone approaches you and about switching, as Stephen stated, you do not have to switch. You're able to stay with the SOS. And please be aware, a lot of calls we get when customers think that they have a third-party supplier, they see that SOS provider on their, for instance, their Pepco bill. That is Pepco, just to let them know. Again, if the marketer says that they are from the utility company, we would suggest you shut them down. Don't walk, but run. The consumer needs to know that even if they make a choice, they have the right to cancel within 3 days. There are additional questions for DC consumers found in the DC Utility Consumer Bill of Rights, or the CBOR. Copies are available on OPC at OPC or on our website. And if you need us to send you a copy, we'd be happy to do so.
Stephen, do you have anything to add?
Oh boy, do I. Let me add, Cheryl talked a little bit about how a representative from these companies would approach you, and I'd be happy to go into that a little more in depth. You need to be aware of what a pitch from a third-party supplier might look like. So let me give you a warning. Local utilities will not come to your home asking to see your bill to give you a cheaper rate. Washington Gas and Pepco do not do that. So if you're being approached by someone who is saying, "Oh, I'm with this company, and I know I can get you a cheaper rate, so just hand me your bill," like Cheryl said, that is not going to happen from the utility. That is a third-party supplier marketing to you. Direct mail is very common in the city. I know I get plenty of letters in my mailbox, and I keep them all for my own personal sick satisfaction. We see written offers that they have to include, by law, all major terms and conditions of the contract. You will look for a signed attached mail stub that can be returned to the supplier for your enrollment. You would sign that. That's agreeing to a contract, so you would be bound by that. There may be a contact number that's asking you to call to enroll by phone. Be sure to understand all the terms and conditions on any kind of mailing before you sign it, before you send it back, or before you make a phone call to these companies, because that will constitute a binding contract. Telemarketing is also very, very common in the district. Companies are allowed to market by phone. They must follow basic consumer protection rules. They cannot contact consumers that are on the federal Do Not Call registry. And there are some steps that must take place. Telemarketers are required to immediately identify themselves and their company and explain that they are not from a local utility. They have to explain the offer in detail and answer any questions that you may have about the consumer product. They're only allowed to call between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. I know that sounds like a very long time, but that is what they're allowed to do. If you agree to enroll, most likely you will be asked to speak with what's called a third-party verifier. This is a company that the third-party marketer will reach out to by phone, and they will record your enrollment questions. And this serves as verification of your intent to contact and enroll with the company. And it represents your signature. Don't feel pressured to confirm your enrollment by phone. You can always request a written contract before you request to enroll with the company. I highly recommend that, just because it's always better to have something in your hand when you're talking to these companies. Some of their offers can be very complex. If you may have seen internet, I know that I see them on social media. These ads, talking about green energy products or cheaper rates. So suppliers must have a website, and that website must list all their registered supplier information. It has to list the rate information, the contract terms, the length of contract. I always tell people to never enter your personal or account information into a web domain that you do not trust. That's basic internet security, so you can take that beyond third-party suppliers and have that in your pocket. All contract terms and must be available to review and print. You have to be able to print the terms for your record keeping. And electronic signatures are acceptable to enter into that contract. So if you agree to sign something and you click, that acts as your signature. In-person solicitors are the ones that we get a lot of trouble with. They may approach you in your home or at a public location, and this includes malls, movie theaters, and farmers markets. As Cheryl spoke earlier about, we've seen instances where these companies will actually sit out in front of government agencies when people are going in to get paperwork, or they're going in for energy assistance through the Low-Income Heating Assistance Program. And the marketers will set up a table out front. And as people are going in, they will say, hey, come to me. I can give you a cheaper rate. You're going in to get energy assistance? I'm energy assistance. Let me see your bill. And they know that companies know that consumers are going in with all the relevant information they need. They'll have a copy of their bill. They'll have their photo ID. This is just like sitting in a barrel. It's a fishbowl that they just know it's a honeypot for consumers to sign up.
So I guess the question that leads me to is, what should a consumer ask an energy supplier if they are interested in switching? We know that we're all interested in lower energy prices, and people will want to switch. So what should a consumer ask an energy supplier?
There are a series of questions that they should ask their supplier, a TPS, when they're knocking at their door or approached by one. One of the things is, what is their company's name, and if the PSC supplier's license, what is that number? If they're here legally, the PSC gives them a license number to do business. They should ask what are the terms and conditions of the contract. And some of this is what Stephen also mentioned previously. Stephen also mentioned the variable rate and a fixed rate. Know that when you have a fixed rate, there's a termination fee, and it's usually about $150. Used to be a lot more than that in OPC as your advocate. Got it. Made sure we had it knocked down. The variable rate. What makes a variable rate so attractive is the fact that it is the rate in which you can cancel without a penalty. So that's one reason why people gravitate toward that one. And again, usually it's not explained in detail that it does fluctuate and how much. As Stephen also mentioned, you want to know the contract length. Does it automatically renew? Some people think if they sign up for a year, it's going to keep going, just like you do with Pepco and Washington Gas. Yes, it will keep rolling, but usually at a higher rate than when you signed up 12 months ago. Ask about the hidden fees. Read the fine print. It is there for that reason. Is there a promotional offer? Be leery of that. What is the price to compare and the local with the local utility? And what fuels are used to produce the energy, whether it was sustainable or renewable? Ask for the name and ID number of the salesperson. And all of these can also be found in our TPS guide.
Stephen, what other concerns come up with these contracts?
Well, I want to stress this issue of a fixed rate versus a variable rate. Their variable rates are very risky for consumers, especially if you are a cost-conscious consumer. Fixed rates can protect a consumer from price fluctuations in prices by offering a guaranteed monthly price, as we talked about. Variable rates, on the other end, can change dramatically from month to month. Mm-hmm. OPC has encountered prices that have more than doubled or sometimes even tripled a price that goes month to month. We've seen low introductory offers as sort of a lure to get consumers to enroll. And then 3 months later or 6 months later, the price can dramatically increase. And that's when consumers really get affected the most. And that's when they reach out to us. We're very good at negotiating these type of contract. So I encourage you to please reach out to OPC.
Okay. Well, how can a consumer who's interested in switching to a third-party supplier compare price and service options? Where can they get help comparison shopping?
I will say that there is a section on the DC Public Service Commission website where you can compare introductory offers. You can view a lot of useful information. It can be somewhat confusing. So I always encourage people to please call OPC. We are very experienced with handling this information. We know the difference in cost associated with both kilowatt hours and therms for gas. That's how we measure it. And I especially will talk nonstop about this subject, and I would be more than willing to give you guidance. And we have helpful information, including our Consumer's Guide to Third-Party Suppliers, available on our website. We can get physical copies mailed out to you. We're out ANC commission meetings, civic association meetings, and we're all over the city. So you can feel free to approach one of us and contact us if you have questions.
Well, that's very helpful. And I, too, want to reiterate to our listeners that OPC's Consumer's Guide to Third-Party Suppliers is an excellent source of information. And everything that we've been talking about today is contained within our guide. So please call our office for a physical copy of the guide, or go to our website at www.opc-dc.gov. We are ready to close out this edition of OPC Radio Connect. I'd like to thank Steve Marincic and Cheryl Morris for educating our listeners about OPC's efforts to assist consumers working through the third-party energy supplier process, and how we are advocating for DC energy consumers who may have complaints related to some of these companies. We hope you will join us for future podcasts when we cover a variety of topics related to utility service, energy, climate change, consumer advocacy, education and protection, and most importantly, making all of you aware that OPC can help when you have a problem with your utilities. We welcome your feedback. You can email us at info@opc-dc.gov. Contact us through Facebook at DC People's Counsel, on Twitter at DCOPC, or give us a call at 202-727-3071. That's 202-727-3071. Also, check out our website at opc-dc.gov. Sign up at opc-dc.gov for our monthly newsletter, the OPC Connection, and get useful consumer information. Thank you for listening. Until next time, I am Karen Sistrunk, Deputy People's Counsel for the District of Columbia, and you've been listening to OPC Radio Connect on DC Radio and WHUR 96.3 HD4.
In DC, for DC, DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.